Today, we celebrate the incredible Tony Banks and all the incredible Tony Banks solos. I was listening to some Genesis recently, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's a great solo. Then I was like, I should do a video about how many great solos there are. And we're going to do the top 10 great solos. Number 10 on my list is a weird one. In fact, the first few seconds are like, is that even a keyboard, or is it a guitar, or is it a harmonica? Or like, it's weird. And so I'm going to throw a little wild card one here for number 10. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't this list going to be subjective? Isn't it going to be just your list and not the official, definitive, biblical list of the best Tony Banks solos from Genesis? No, this is the official one. Okay, I'm just kidding. As I'm doing this, I want you in the comments to leave your top 10 Genesis solos. I kind of, Genesis keyboard solos, I kind of just, this is a crazy task. As I was doing this, I realized my 10 was actually 11. So I have 11. Also, I was realizing that I have 8 runner-ups that could easily put into this list at any point. So I probably could have done top 20 solos easily, but I want to focus on 10. I think it's fun to challenge. So in the comments below, you leave your list as well. Also, by the way, I'm doing album onlys. I'm only doing the album versions, not the live versions. And in case you're like, oh, the Seconds Out version is a little bit better. I know that there's some B-sides out there that has some incredible solos, but I'm just going with album stuff. And of course, we're doing Genesis stuff, not any of his solo keyboard solos. Okay, the first one is Swung. There's a little clue for you. One of the very few Genesis songs that are swung. It's one of their most recent songs. It's probably the most underappreciated, forgotten Genesis songs of all time. I think it was done live maybe once. And that's Way of the World. And so I know I'm throwing out like a weird one here. And I've cut some from my list that you probably would be pissed off about, but I really like this solo, and it comes in almost as a guitar solo. And like, you got to tell me, folks, I mean, maybe it is a guitar through some sort of pedal or whatever, but honestly, it sounds super clean, like a clean guitar solo. But then it becomes pretty clear that it's a keyboard. And in the 90s, it also sounds like a sax. Like, it sounds like a sax is coming in. Listen to how it comes out of the chorus. I mean, it's just so swung. It's so cool. Then it becomes very clearly a Tony Banks keyboard solo. Anyway, I don't know what if he was using like a sax preset on the keyboard or like a clean guitar sound or whatever, and he manipulated it. I think it's one of the underappreciated Tony Banks keyboard solos. So even though I put it above some songs that you would have on your list, I want to put it on this list at number 10 because I love Way of the World. And I think out of that solo, it goes, we all agree. So it really kind of lifts the song a lot. Big fan of this solo. Okay, another one coming at number 9 that I think is a little underappreciated. And I know that I said I want to only talk about album versions, but I fell in love with this solo from Three Sides Live. And that is the solo on Dodo. This is what it said to me. By the way, I'm playing clips for you, even though it's going to get me in trouble with YouTube playing copyrighted music. I'm doing it because I think it's essential that we remember these songs when I play these clips. So normally I can't play clips. I'm going to do it at the risk of getting in trouble on the YouTube channel, but we'll do it. I guess I'm probably referring to the song Lurker. I don't know the difference between Dodo and Lurker, but the whole song is very dark and spooky. I think they opened the Shapes tour with it. I don't mind this song. I quite like it, but I love it because of this bright moment, this solo. And what's cool about this solo is it's kind of like harkens back to this like short little period of Phil Collins drumming when the drums would mimic a lot of the keyboard sounds, or sorry, a lot of the keyboard melodies and the rhythms, or the vocal melodies and rhythms. And so what I mean by that is like If you listen to Behind the Lines or I Cannot Believe It's True, stuff that the horns are doing or that Phil is singing, the drums are playing along with that. I cannot believe it's true. Believe me. You know that believe me? Like the drums are doing that. But and so he kind of like, I think when you listen to this solo, what I really like is that it's a very staccato solo, and Phil is playing along with this solo in a really, really tight way. So that's one of the reasons I really like it. I just like that it brings us out of this dark and spooky song into something that's a little bit more positive and brighter. He could have done a dark and scary in the Quiet Earth type solo on this song, but instead he does something that's bright and happy, and that's why I like it. Coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 8 is probably one of, okay, I'm putting this solo, even though it's super basic, I'm putting this solo on my list not because of the song that it's on, but because of its final resting place, which was on a completely different song, but only on live versions. Any clues there? The solo is not known for the song itself, but where it would end up later on another song on live tours, and that is Stagnation. The kind of the sing-along chorus that would be embedded into You Know What I Like, to the point that if you only listen to You Know What I Like on live versions, you would think it is just an outro to the song. The da da dum da da da. To me, it's come to life so much in the live versions, and I love that they always did these callbacks until like even the last tour. I think they continued to do that callback. I could never hear I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe without that melody. And Genesis has been known to do these medleys, much to the chagrin of a lot of fans, but I get it. They're trying to, for people to hear a lot of songs. And there's been some really great In the Cage melodies in the early days. But sometimes they would shoehorn a song into an existing song just to have it played. For example, on the 91, 92 tours with We Can't Dance, how they fit in Illegal Alien and Follow You, Follow Me, and That's All into I Know What I Like. Those were obviously shoehorned. It didn't work well. But when they put the solo of Stagnation into I Know What I Like, it belongs there. It absolutely belongs there. So I'm putting this on my list because it's a beautiful song. Trespass is a beautiful album, and Stagnation solo. It's not like, I think probably a lot of us could learn it in an afternoon. It's not that difficult compared to some of his other ones and other ones on my list. But gosh, it's really beautiful. Very, very simple and very beautiful. Reminds me a little bit of Los Endos solo. I am cheating because I told you that my list is based on album versions and not on live versions. And I'm kind of lying because this next one at number 7 is, as a song, it's pretty good. But when it was done in the Cage medley, I thought it was just absolutely magical. So, again, I think I'm breaking my rules here. But the song I'm talking about is The Colony of Slipperman. And I think like the song itself is cool. And there's a lot of this like organy sound that's happening in the song. But when they get to that solo that we would hear in that Afterglow, in the Cage medley occasionally, in that medley was super, super exciting when they would kind of build up into that solo. So again, I'm breaking my own rules. I'm judging this solo based on how it was used live, but I think it's great. On record, it's great as well. Okay, whilst editing the audio, I was doing all the clips before I go and edit this episode, and I realized that Slipperman is probably my favorite. It's probably because of how it feels in the medley, especially on the Shapes tour. But I think this one might be my favorite on the list. Tell me, what was that done on? Because it does have kind of a very, standard ARPy sound or Moog sound. It's a sound that's kind of like with those quick glides. It's come back very popular now. So we hear it a lot in today's music and in Daft Punk. And so I I think it's cool for that reason as well. And that's one of the other things too. When I'm judging a keyboard solo, I'm judging it a lot on the sounds that he's used. And so the sounds here, this Stranger Things type of sound, is very cool. And it's one of the reasons why I included The Way of the World as well, because I just thought that was a really cool sound. I'm like, is a sax solo starting? No, it's not. It's a keyboard solo. I just thought, the sounds to me, if they're kind of very distinct and iconic, that leads me to another thing I forgot to mention, that I'm not including any piano solos in here. So you're not going to see the intro to Firth the Fifth on this list, which that's just my own rules. I like to kind of keep these lists confined to like following rules. And it's not a keyboard solo, it's a piano solo. I know there's some other piano moments in his career. But I like to talk about just keyboard synths, potentially organs or mellotrons. But I really just love that kind of brassy synth. I love the synth that cuts through the mix. It's what a lot of bands would go on to copy these guys for in the early 80s. Anyway, Slipperman. Okay, number 6 will be on everybody's list, I think, and that's Fading Lights. I put it in the middle of my pack because I find it really good. The song is really good. It's a incredibly well played solo. It's very long, very difficult. I don't find it as emotional as, say, Stagnation, or even Way of the World, even though it's higher on my list just because it's an iconic solo. Also, a ton of great sounds too, right? This kind of weird, almost sounds a little bit like that vocoder sound a little bit. Also, it's one of those solos that he has that has multiple parts. It's probably written in sections, and it has kind of a middle section, and it's very long. The band's just kind of going crazy supporting this solo, and then it all kind of falls back together for this like soft little outro by Phil, and it's the end of the album. So that's what makes it so special. This song has taken on so much meaning for people. I don't know what people's thoughts were about this song back in 1990 or 91 when this record came out. If it was considered to be an iconic song, I don't think so. I think that over the years, when we reflect on the title and the lyrics, and then just the outro of this song being somewhat of a farewell, I think it's really taken on new life for people. As I kind of listen to some of these songs, I kind of feel like my list could move all over the place. I'm putting this song high on my list because I love this song. It's probably my top 5 Genesis songs, and that's Cinema Show. And I think we've got this kind of a little bit of a trade-off with, I dig this song. I dig the solo. I think it's really cool. It's very complicated, complex, and it speaks to what I love about the song. My preference actually is more the first half of the song, just the kind of the grooves and the story and the lyrics and the melody. I really, really love Cinema Show for that. And then the solo at the end of the song is great as well. It does kind of peter out a little bit, unfortunately. Just the song itself. I feel like I'm talking myself out of this being so high on my list. Like, I wonder if I should have almost like dropped it down a little bit, because there's a lot of similarities between Cinema Show and Firth the Fifth. And I feel like the musical, the melodic part of Cinema Show is stronger than the melodic part of Firth of Fifth. But then the solo part, the instrumental part of Firth of Fifth is stronger than Cinema Show. Does that make sense? Anyway, Cinema Show solo, great. Okay, coming in at number 4, we're covering a lot of albums here, and I'll do a little bit of there's some albums that are not represented here, and I have some runner-ups, some honorable mentions that I'll mention at the end of this list. But now let's go for a representation from Duke, and that is Duke's Travels. I mean, this is great. This is probably one of the only Genesis songs, although I think perhaps In That Quiet Earth, maybe, but where like the whole song is a solo, unless you consider the Brazilian. I mean, Brazilian's not on this list at all. I'm not really considering it a solo. It's like the whole song is just an instrumental. I don't really. Duke's Travels really is like just Tony Banks on display. And then, kind of the band and the vocals come back a little bit more on the end. But this song really is. I mean, it borrows a little bit from Cinema Show. It borrows a little bit from Slipperman, and it even foreshadows a bit of Fading Light. So I love this solo. This is one of the great examples of just listening to Genesis instrumental. And, I remember that anecdote that Phil tells about how when Peter left, he made the suggestion that we just be an instrumental band, similar to Brand X, and everyone laughed at him and told him to shut up. But I don't think it's crazy. I mean, obviously, they would never have been as big as they are as an instrumental band, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation today if they did choose to do that. But I think they could have done a good job at it. Which reminds me, as a musician myself, I release an album every couple of years. One of the things I've gotten into doing the past 3 or 4 albums is I release an instrumental version of that album. I just go into the sessions and mute all the vocals and the background vocals. And then I master that album just instrumental and release it, not on vinyl or anything or on CD, but just digitally as an alternative way for people to listen to my music without my voice, which is my preferred way to listen to it. And it kind of makes good background music and dinner party music and studying music. Gosh, it made me think how much I would love to have some of these albums without vocals. No disrespect to Phil, of course, it's a Phil channel. But I mean, imagine just listening to Duke without vocals. It would be really great if people, listen, Concord, if you want to milk the machine, then go into the Duke sessions and mute all the vocals. No disrespect to Phil, but just to highlight how incredible Phil is on drums and Mike and guitar and bass and Tony on keyboards, of course. But that would be an incredible listen. Abacab, you know what I mean? Just as an instrumental album would be insane. We could probably get through Whodunit. Duke's Travels, sorry, just to kind of bring this back. I mean, I know that there's the guide vocal part at the end, but the Duke's Travels is another good example, too, of electric guitar and synths playing well with each other. I love that a lot. Okay, coming in at number 3, an absolute live staple, and that is In the Cage. Probably one of the most, I mean, we're in the top 3 now. I think that you're going to agree with me on 2 of the 3. And on the one of the 3, it's going to take a little convincing, but bear with me. Number 3 is In the Cage solo. I didn't grow up listening to In the Cage. I didn't grow up listening to The Lamb. I grew up listening to Shapes and Invisible Touch and We Can't Dance. I think my first exposure, really to In the Cage as such a big song would have been in 2007 when they played it live. They had that kind of horrible 8-bit graphic to it. And that part was like that and Domino was just completely given way too much airtime on that 2007 documentary they did about that tour. So I guess I've turned out to really love In the Cage because all of the live bootlegs I have from over the years, they played In the Cage. Like that's got to be one of the songs they played the most, right? That and I Know What I Like, and maybe Um, like I know that Firth and Cinema Show and stuff that they played in pieces over the years, but like when it comes to like the full bodied song, it was I Know What I Like, In the Cage. Yeah, I feel like those are the two songs that like lasted almost every tour. Anyway, so I've kind of been gaslit into enjoying this song. I've had to hear this song all the time, and now I really do like it. But the solo's great. I've never had an issue with the solo, and it's what really makes this song. Listen to that moment too, where Phil is doing these drums, you know, Brand X style drums to the. It's so cool, and this is one of those songs where Tony gets going, and we love him for the speed. There's some solos I've talked about today that are, and I haven't touched on yet, that are slower and more emotional. But then there's some solos where he's just ripping and lighting a fire over the keyboard. Okay, number 2 is I got to give credit to somebody on Reddit for reminding me of this solo. This is one of my favorite Genesis songs. But I would have never, when I started making this list, I had no intentions, no concept of putting this on my list, let alone at number 2. And it's because it's not known as a Tony Banks solo song. It's known as just a great pop song. And it's one of my favorite Genesis songs of all time. But I did a quick little search online to see if anybody had written any articles about keyboard solos, about Tony's keyboard solos, if anyone had talked about what we're talking about today. And somebody out of the blue brought up the song Follow You, Follow Me, and the keyboard solo on Follow You, Follow Me. And I realized, oh my gosh, what a gorgeous. And I mean, remember, I've been talking throughout this video about keyboard solos like Stagnation that aren't necessarily impressive in technique, but are very emotive and cinematic. And then there are solos that maybe aren't going to raise your goosebumps from a emotional standpoint, but are really impressive and exciting and rhythmic. Follow You, Follow Me is the hybrid. It's the absolute perfect solo that just is so impressive, so fast, exciting, yet so melodic and very complementary to the song. This is one of those solos that when I'm listening to this song, I'm just holding my breath through the whole solo because I don't want to miss a beat. I don't want to miss a note. It's just so beautiful in it. And it just cascades and crescendos to another chorus. And that, to me, I think that's like a very quintessential role of a solo in the 80s and beyond, which would be to be some sort of bridge or to be played after a bridge, but then to rise up and to kind of usher in the final chorus. We hear that on Way of the World, and we hear that on Follow You, Follow Me. And I love this solo. I love it so much. Let me know in the comments if you had put Follow You, Follow Me, because I know we've come to the end of my list just about, and there's a lot here that we've missed. There's a lot of solos that I haven't included, which we'll talk about in the honorable mentions, which I'm sure might be on your list. But Follow You, Follow Me, come on. You cannot argue how gorgeous and how technical and exciting that solo is. And number 1 is Firth of Fifth. Not the piano intro, but the keyboard solo. If there is ever a solo that I sing along to from start to finish while driving in my car and getting in a car accident, it is this one. I am playing air drums to it. I am singing the parts. I'm conducting it like an orchestra. I have autopilot on. Don't worry. I have autopilot on, so the car is staying in the lanes itself. It has veered off the road a few times during this song, but it's about eight and a half minutes or so, and driving in the ditch for that long is not usually a problem. You can usually veer back on. But my gosh, I love this song. And like I mentioned, I love this song. I love everything about it. Piano intro is iconic, fine. We don't hear it live ever. It has a very simple groove that we would hear throughout Selling England by the Pound. Selling England by the Pound is my favorite Genesis album. It's a very light groove. I don't think it's as exciting and sing-alongable as the first half of Cinema Show, but it does what it should do, which is set the stage for this big outro. And we have a piano solo into the big crescendo. You know, one of the things that a lot of people missed after Steve left was having a keyboard solo go into a guitar solo in this case, or the other way around, having a guitar solo go into a keyboard solo. That's getting into jam band territory, but Genesis never got too far into jam band territory where like you've heard a couple solos and now you got to go to the bathroom. They always left you wanting more. Anyway, this song is probably what a lot of people would say is Steve's greatest song, Steve's greatest contribution to the band is the solo in Firth of Fifth. I remember when I saw the musical box live, it was this solo, this keyboard solo, and the piano intro, and the keyboard solo, and the guitar solo, which had people clapping throughout the whole song and standing ovation. It is very clear to me after being at that show, seeing Supper's Ready, seeing some of the iconic songs throughout the year, Watchers of the Skies. It is very clear to me that Firth of Fifth is most Genesis' favorite Genesis song. Even though people have to pick Supper's Ready by default, I believe that deep down, this is their favorite song because it's more concise. It's just more edible. Supper's Ready is an album. Supper's Ready is an entire side. It is a collection of songs. Being at the show and seeing the way that people responded to the various exciting moments of Firth of Fifth, I was like, this is people's favorite song, and I don't know why they're afraid to admit it. Anyway, that's my list. Here's things I had to leave off. Los Endos. That kind of solo that is a bit of a coda from the beginning of the album, that is very iconic to the end credits of their live shows. Los Endos I couldn't put on this list. I didn't have time. The Dividing Line. There's a great solo in the Dividing Line, just to show a little bit of respect to Calling All Stations. In That Quiet Earth is one of my favorite moments in the medley, but I had to pull it off the list because we just had too many. It was my 11th. Can Utility as well. The Lady Lies. One that was, really, really great and technically really great is Robbery, Assault, and Battery. And that is like super fast, very complex, very exciting. But it doesn't move me. That song doesn't move me. And the solo's fine, but we only had 10 spots. And then of course, Supper's Ready. Is it Apocalypse of 9/8 that, that doesn't do it for me. And it would be nice to make a top 10 list about Genesis that doesn't include Supper's Ready. So that solo is great, technical. Again, what an embarrassment of riches when it comes to Tony Banks solos. And I think that you guys are going to leave some songs in the comments that I've missed, not only in my top 10 list, but also in my honorable mentions. You're going to be like, what about this song? I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. So please do that. Please let me know. And again, we're trying to stick to album versions. We're trying to stick to non-B-sides, even though I know like Inside and Out there's a great solo there. And we're trying to stick to keyboards and synthesizers specifically. But please, thank you for watching. In the comments below, let me know your top 10 Tony Banks keyboard solos. Thanks for watching.